although I agree on all the problems which have been mentioned here, you can advise them on beautiful concession agreements, you can take them through the technical problems in designing, in the tendering, all that we are doing, and it fairly works. So in the end, you can come up with a good concession agreement. It is well structured, it enables a corporation to really monitor, but then you come to the next step. And the next step is the contract monitoring and the ability and the willingness to monitor. And there we very often see the problem. Of course, if you take a very complex water supply and sewerage concession, it is also very difficult to monitor. That's a matter of capacities and everything. I would agree what has been said about capacity development. It has to be very case specific, of course. But there's also a lack of willingness. And I would put it very, very bland. If you look into the crisis of public toilets, and my recommendation would be, if a city is able to monitor a simple PPP model for public toilets, where even an illiterate, and I'm a little bit exaggerating, would be able to monitor, because you have to just only go in twice in a day randomly and see, is it clean, is it serviced, is there drinking water, is there any safety issue? So if you are able to do that, and if you can perform, and if you can show that, and if incentives are set on such a thing, then I would say a city is eligible for moving for the next step, for the next more complicated PPP, and for the respective funding support for that. Otherwise, my experience is these incentives are very, very much needed on the local level to get the people out of just, okay, being happy about funds, but then not seeing to it that they are sustainably managed on the ground. And maybe a sense of competition, which such a simple model could really help to also direct capacity building into the right channels. Because suddenly then the urban local bodies will get motivation to improve on that. Thank you very much.
Yes, please.
I have one observation. This is regarding PPP project. My name is Arvind Kumar. Earlier I was with the Ministry of Shipping and Road Transport. I have one observation that most of these PPP projects are executed through SPVs. And the problem with SPVs is they are not listed anywhere. They are private entities. One example is Delhi Gurgaon. You see, if you want to study any SPV, you can't get any information. No one knows about their financials. At best, you can get a consolidated report of some infrastructure group. It doesn't tell you what are its activities and what were its revenue streams. So one area is SPVs. They are very, very opaque.
Yeah.
I'm Vidya Unikrishnan. There are a few observations, like when you speak about PPP and other things, like as the local body, have they leveraged the, have they utilized the already existing capacity with them? Have they been able to, have they attained the desirable level of collection efficiency in terms of rising funds and other things? And as a part of our project, we went for a couple of field visits. Like one thing what we could see in a corporation where people don't grip too much about finance, where they say like, we have sufficient finances, they have a vision compared to other corporations who says that they don't have sufficient finance. It's like they plan ahead. So you have an infrastructure crisis, so you can't plan it then and there. So sitting in 2014, you should know what would be the requirement of 2024. I think such a vision would help cities to generate the funds much better compared to, it's not always the funding crisis, it's sometimes the lack of vision which hinders cities to build up the sufficient infrastructure.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm Arun Maira from the Planning Commission, and I learned a lot from Professor Cook and Professor Manthi, Dr. Manthi, your comments and the questions and observations here. And this is my thoughts. I liked Gajendra's expression, we need a full-fledged effort to get a PPP introduced into the country, starting, as he said, with the recognition that there's a finance deficit. But I think there are two other deficits which go along with it if you want a full-fledged effort. One, there's a big trust deficit, and that's leading and complicating a governance deficit. So we have to address this whole system together. It's not just the knowledge that there's a need for finance, there's also a knowledge that we need to build the trust of the people in the government and the governance, and so that we can then get the change. And that leads to what Professor Smoke said. We need a strategy for implementation of change. And we can have, abstractly that this is the desirable place where everybody should be. So this is a theoretical model of what's the best. But everyone is in their own place B, and the B is not the same for everybody. B1, B2, B3, B5, and to B, everything, different numbers there. So you have to start the journey from where you are. And therefore a diagnostic of where are we, and then a collective will to move from there to the next step. So it comes down to action at the local level. And to help the action at the local level, what we can do from the theoretical side is to give a model to the local level of what its system is, what are the key constituents of its system, the model of its system, so it can do a self-diagnostic about what do we need to change in our system to make it better. And then take the next step. And the next step will not be the same for B1, B2, B3, B4. So you can't have a standard journey to get from B to A. So what are the two things that you would like to give to the local, where the action will have to start? And always will be local. The local will go to the next step and the next step and the next step. One is this framework that I talked about, a framework of the body, as it were, and what makes a body function, that local urban system function, which they must understand and they must use for a self-diagnostic. And that process of the self-diagnostic must be a participative process with all the stakeholders involved. And you referred to that if there are private sector companies who could be sources of money or of service, they are a stakeholder, but so are the people there. And so what would be the arrangement in which the people would have trust in whatever is the next step that is going to be taken? So you can give the next thing, along with the diagnostic to the people, is some process, some principles and tools for carrying out this process of coming to an agreement together and monitoring their own progress as they go forward. I would like to say that in the new JN and RUM, we made this the central part. And I would wish that whenever we talk about what the learning we've had out of JN and RUM 1 and what's the essence of the good things we're going to do in the next one, this is it actually. And to provide therefore to the people the tools, and I think thereafter, and Mr. Manthi, you were strongly a part of it, so I'll credit you, that the central assistance is given to you to enable you to do this diagnosis and to make your plan together, which links to the capacity building as we go forth. So that was my thoughts, that you cannot separate the ideas about policy and finance from the process of change, and the process of change must be local and must be collaborative. Thank you.
Sir, this is on the issue of PPP and urban financing. Since morning, if you look at the two major themes in financing coming, one is that the monetization of the land, and the second is PPP. Hyderabad Metro Rail PPP project, in fact, combines both. And taking clue from this, I'll make 2 points. First is that, why is it that within the road sector we have been fairly successful in getting the PPP project, but it has not happened in the urban sector? There seems to be the 2 reasons for that. One is that the economics of the road sector is such that if the traffic is high, then the project becomes financially attractive. Whereas if you really look at a large number of urban services, our ability to increase the user charges despite 7 years of JNRM has been very limited. And therefore, the finances do not work out the way that you can actually get it on the VGA-based financing of 20% of Government of India. So it brings you to the another point that you have to sweeten the project. Now, the moment you enter into the territory of sweetening the project, you do it with the land. And there comes a final issue that in the PPP project, when you bid a project, you have to define the land value, you have to define the land use pattern upfront. Now, the problem is that once you put in infrastructure, when is this land price going to peak? That you do not know. So the big chance and big danger of that is that the moment you sweeten it with the land, it is quite possible that government may miss a huge amount of the revenue which that project would have given. So what we need to discuss is that one model is Hyderabad model, where you combine both the concessionaire who happens to develop the real estate, and the concessionaire who happens to develop the metro rail is the same guy. And he cross-subsidizes himself. The other model which is possible is that the government entity working as a fulcrum on which you have two sets of concessionaire. One looks into the land issues and one look into the construction issues, and therefore unbundle the project. We have not looked into this, but this is a very serious issue, because otherwise if every municipal body think that why do I get into this uncharted territory where I have an allegation that I have given a lot of leeways to the private guys to do the PPP. Coupled with it, there is a lack of demand. You do not have the money, you do not have the capacity or the vision to spend even the budgetary resources. So why will you really ask for PPP? I asked Mr. Gautam, why don't you go for bond? He said, you're giving so much money on the JNRM. So that is as simple as that.
Thank you, Mohanty. Let's go back to what Paul was saying. Paul, were you trying to say that these 25 countries or 30 countries that you have been to, they're finding it very difficult to come to terms with decentralization in whatever way you define them? Or are you saying that the principle of subsidiarity, the decentralization theorem, they are far too ambitious or flawed? What are you saying there? That's one point. The second observation that I had on what you said was, I was saying that fiscal decentralization is a necessary condition, but not a sufficient one. And you need to bring in many more things in order to see the benefits of decentralization. Is that what you were trying to sort of put this afternoon? I got confused. I came late, and I got confused by the time you concluded your statements. Thank you.
When we talk of PPP, one important issue which we have to take into account, the internalities and the externalities. In case the project is generating certain externalities which cannot be tapped by the concessionaire, in that case, the likelihood of that sector or project being done on PPP reduces. And that is what happens in case of metro rail projects, because the externalities of those projects, the value generation which is happening outside the project, which is outside the domain of concessionaire, is much higher, and tapping that becomes the responsibility of the local body or the state government. And hence, if we see the investment which is being made into the project, getting returns to the project becomes difficult. And that is the reason globally, if you see that 88% projects in metro rail have been implemented with public sector financing. Too much of land or property development, as has been pointed out by Mr. Rakesh Anjan. Not only there are issues of not knowing the right value which you are giving right in the beginning, because it is very difficult to judge, but there are also issues of converting the transport project into real estate project. Because what the public service needs to be provided is transport. Real estate can develop, but if you do not provide transport in time, then the public suffers. Hyderabad, once the bid failed, so the entire project got a setback of about 6 to 7 years.
Mr. Ramchandran.
Thank you. Couple of brief observations coming back to our context. The first point is what needs to be done in terms of improving finances. I think it's all stated there in Dr. Ishwar Ahluwalia's SPEC report. It's a question of somebody taking it up and taking decisions on that. That itself will take us forward substantially. There are decisions possible on that. There is nothing more which is required at this current stage. The second point, since this is